Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is a wee bit of a disagreement between the Greens and the SNP, where even the Greens are now falling for the latest nonsense, the SNP, on how we will achieve independence for those that wish it. Okay, and it's a follow-up to the manifesto that the SNP launched yesterday, where they claimed in one paragraph out of a multi-page booklet they spoke about independence, and what they said was if the SNP get the majority of the seats at Westminster, that will let them go to the British government to try and get a mandate or prove a mandate for a referendum stroke independence, which I've done a video on yesterday, and I discussed the total nonsense of it, because you could probably get half the seats in Westminster with about 30% of the vote, which is highly, so if they get that, which is looking ever unlikely with the current polls that are coming out daily, Westminster would just laugh at the notion. Why would someone turn up at Westminster and say, look at these election results, that shows you that the Scots want a referendum, when 30% voted for them? So it seems like people who want independence, like Patrick Harvie, are picking up on this complete and utter bollocks of a notion, and this actually shows no route to independence for the SNP. And what I've been considering over the last couple of days is, if they don't get the majority of the seats in Scotland, does that mean they've got a mandate to ask Westminster to never give them a referendum, because the majority of people would not be wanting one if that's what they're going to use? And that's also been picked up by Patrick Harvie, which is odd, because I never normally agree with the cretin, but it shows you a split within the nationalist movement, which I've been saying for a long time. So the story's covered in a few outlets. The one I'm using is the Daily Record, and their headline is SNP and Greens in general election split on independence strategy. The Greens do not agree with the SNP on using a victory at Westminster election as a mandate for IndyRef2. The Scots Greens and SNP are splitting the strategy for using the election results as an independent mandate. John Swinney's party say winning the majority of constituencies would give them democratic effect to independence talks. But Green co-leader Patrick Harvie said his party instead supported the power over constitutional reforms to be devolved. The UK Supreme Court ruled in 2022 that Holyrood does not have the power to hold IndyRef2 without Westminster's approval. Harvie said he is not convinced the Westminster electoral system, which uses first past the post, could genuinely count as a mandate. It was put to him that Labour could use the election as a mandate not to hold a referendum if it wins a majority of seats in Scotland, similar to SNP's approach. So let me just scroll down here. Harvie said, I question whether the majority of seats under the first past the post genuinely reflects a mandate. If they were to win 50% of the votes in Scotland, you would have to respect that. You would have to recognise that that was the way the majority of people in Scotland, the majority of people choosing to cast their vote. I don't think that's likely to happen. But if any party was to get that level of 50% plus support, other parties would have to respect that. But what I don't think any political party can claim a mandate for is for the right of the UK Parliament to decide the timing of a future decision on Scottish independence, because only 10% of the MPs in the UK Parliament have any mandate at all coming from Scotland. It has to be for the Scottish voters to be able to determine this decision for themselves, not that decision being made in Westminster for all. So what he's saying is, can he use that to prove Scottish people want independence? That decision should just be made by Holyrood, and then what would happen? Would Holyrood just make that decision whenever they felt like it, and not the actual mandate from anybody? Because I don't think it matters where the decision's made. To prove that there's an appetite for an independence referendum has to be put before any decision about a Scottish referendum. So what he's saying is, he just doesn't like the fact that Westminster get to decide yes or no to a referendum. That should be the Scottish Parliament. But if you reverse that thinking a wee bit, then why does it matter? Because he's also saying that you would need to have 50% plus of the voters. In that case, Westminster would probably agree with it. So what he's really asking for is the power to be swung to Holyrood so they can decide whenever they want it without any checks and balances put in place, which is quite ironic because Holyrood would be in the same position. You could have someone having more than 50% of the seats with less than 50% of the votes. So he's sort of contradicting himself as our Patrick, but that doesn't surprise me because he is a half-wit. The split reflects wider clashes in the independence movement and policy as well as personality. Swinney told the Record this week that he would never again campaign with Alex Salmond, leader of the pro-independence Alba Party. The First Minister worked with Salmond for decades at Westminster and Holyrood, serving as his finance secretary for 7 years. Isn't that bizarre? But Salmond fell out badly with his successor as First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. This was over the government's unlawful probe into sexual harassment claims against Salmond. We asked Swinney if he could ever campaign again with Salmond. He said no, because I feel very distant from who he is. So that's good. All these indie lovers, they seem to be disagreeing quite a lot, which is fantastic. And it's no surprise because the Curdle one was never going to last long because they all have their own ideas on how independence should be achieved and how they should get the majority of Scots to buy into it in the first place. So it's no surprise to me. And when you actually look at the manifesto they produced yesterday, there's not a lot of what we'll do. There's a lot of what other people should do, right? And only they told their own members in October when they had their conference, we will put the independence, front page, line 1 of our manifesto. Well, you did. You wrote vote SNPs a vote for independence. But you only explained in one paragraph on page 9 how you're actually going to achieve it. And the excuse that you used to achieve it has already been blown out the water by people on the same side, people who want independence. Because Patrick Harvie wants independence and he's saying that's a lot of nonsense. That route will not work. And I keep saying it. If you were the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and some SNP MP, if there are any, comes up to you and says, we get the most seats in here, right? We want a referendum. You'd say, okay, how many votes did you get? We get 32.5%. The Scottish electorate has spoken. Have they? Aye. Well, I tell you what, 67.5% have not agreed with you. So, I'll take that mandate as doing hee-haw for you, right? Or likewise, if they get under half the seats, which would be 28 or less, which looks pretty reasonable to suggest that, does that then say, well, the mandate from the Scottish people is bugger off. We're not interested in your blether for referendums anymore. Because that's the same thing. What you're suggesting is if you get more than half the seats, or half the seats or more, then that's the Scottish people determining what they want. So if you get less than half the seats, that's Scottish people determining what you want. So anybody that doesn't want the SNP to carry on with a charade that they're chasing a referendum, then tactically vote them right out the door. There's no point in voting for somebody that comes third and SNP win. You'd have been as well giving your vote to them who looks likely to come at least second. Then you get a chance to oust them. You with me? Pop them out, off you pop, cheery bye now. That's what we do with them. So, something else I want to talk about. What was it? Something else I was what? Can't remember. Must have been nonsense. Must have been an SNP manifesto or something. But aye, that was Patrick Harvie's response to it. And I also like Peter Smith from ITV. He interviewed Swinney after it and was just like smashing him all over the place with this independence thing. Oh, aye, that was the thing he said. He's not prepared. I might actually do a video on this. He's not prepared to talk about new oil leases, because that's Westminster's job to give them out, not the Scottish Parliament's. Yet, on every other reserved power that Westminster have over Scotland, he's always quick to give his opinion and his demands on every reserved power, apart from yesterday, when he was quite clearly asked, would the SNP issue or no issue, or would advocate issuing or no issuing of any new leases to look for oil in the North Sea. Then he shut the fuck up. right? And that's because he can't win that argument. If he says, no, we're not issuing them, then folk like Stephen Flynn might struggle to get voted on because they live in and want to be the MP for areas in Aberdeen that rely on oil. And if he says, yes, we do advocate new leases, then the Greens fall out him. And he needs somebody come the next Scottish budget, because if he doesn't get a Scottish budget through, this is important that you understand this. If the minority government don't get a budget through, they get papped out of government and they automatically go for an election. And looking at the polls for this Westminster election, the last thing any SNP MSP from Holyrood wants is an election anytime soon, because they would get tapped. Simple as that. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please subscribe and hit the notifications bell. But most importantly of all, as long as you're no SNP or even this crank Harvie, see everybody else. Have a great day. Cheery bye now.